everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be doing another album review. Today I'm going to be looking at this album by The Cure. It's their second album, 17 Seconds. So yes, I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, then showing you my vinyl copy of it here, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. So as I said, this was the band's second studio album, released on the 22nd of April in 1980. Now this is a very different sort of album from the debut Three Imaginary Boys, which had a more kind of power pop, sort of punk kind of feel to it, sort of kind of Buzzcocks-y sort of like sound to it. However, band leader Robert Smith was very keen to change the band's direction, because around this time, he had a short stint in supporting Susie and the Banshees. He was inspired by their more sort of darker, more gothic sort of sound. Now their original bass player, a guy called Michael Dempsey, he was more inspired by kind of new wave bands, sort of things like XTC, he and Robert Smith began to drift apart during this era. He was replaced by Simon Gallup, who became a long-time member of The Cure. I believe that he's still with them to this day, and a keyboardist called Matthew Hartley was added, which gave the songs a more kind of ethereal feel. The musical inspirations for the album were very wide-reaching. Robert Smith says that he was listening to a lot of Nick Drake's album Five Leaves Green, Jimi Hendrix's The Isle of Wight, Van Morrison's Astral Weeks, and David Bowie's Low when writing this album. Recording it was quite a tight budget affair because they only had £3,000 worth of finance, basically the profits from the debut. So the recordings took place over 7 days, with the band working up to 17 hours a day and also sleeping and basically just living in the studio. However, it did pay off though, because it was quite a successful album for The Cure. It reached number 20 in the UK charts, which isn't bad for a relatively new band off the time. And critically, it was quite well received. A lot of people praised The Cure sort of building their sound and becoming a bit more unsettling, and also kind of creatively, effectively sort of creating a new musical genre. So I will just show you my vinyl copy of it here. This is a original copy of it, but it's not in the best nick. It's a little bit worn and sort of tatty, especially on the back there. But yeah, a nice original copy here of 17 Seconds. Said the band, this was the band's sort of portrait shots there, so very blurry. They were kind of going for, I guess, at this time, this sort of anti-image kind of thing. They didn't really want anyone to know what they looked like and that. So yeah, that's the actual cover there. There's no fancy in the sleeve, but the record label I'll just show, it's a nice sort of custom label there, just on Fiction Records. So yeah, that's the vinyl looked at. Okay, so now I will go over each of the album songs. So I'll score each track out of 10, and the user scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album. So it kicks off with a song called A Reflection, which is a short, kind of brooding sort of introduction to the album. You've got these big kind of piano chords in it, and this occasional chiming guitar going on as well. I mean, as a song, it's not much off a song. There's no, as I said, it's just an instrumental kind of introduction to the album, but it is a good mood setter. It certainly sets up the album quite well. So yes, A Reflection for me will get a 7 out of 10. Next one is called Play for Today, which is a kind of laid-back song, I sort of think, but at the same time, it is one of the more upbeat tracks on the album. I think it just takes a while for us to get to the lyrics, which kind of allows the song to grow and it just sort of gets into its groove a little bit. Got a great guitar tone on it, which sounds very deep, but very expansive as well, at the same time. A very sort of new sound for the time, and something which I don't think sounds too dated either now. It certainly still sounds quite ahead of its time. And yeah, the actual song itself is really good. It's one they still play live to this day. So yeah, for me, Play for Today we'll get a 10 out of 10. Next up is called Secrets, which is a half-decent song. This one's more punctuated by Gallop's bass line on it. Again, it's another sort of slower, more sort of brooding track, but for me it just isn't very exciting, and it doesn't really move me like some of like the other stuff. Again, you've got this kind of ghostly, ethereal voice in it, which gives it a cold sort of feeling, but yeah, it actually has some quite nice kind of like romantic kind of lyrics on it, sort of like he sings it: strangers, nobody knows we love, I catch your eye in the dark. I guess it's maybe kind of just like the juxtaposition of the kind of the very sort of dark music and like these lyrics, which on the surface at least seem quite nice. It seem quite romantic. That's Secrets, which for me would get a 7 out of 10. Next track up is called In Your House, which is again another dark, another slower track. These songs, I find it quite difficult to sort of separate like these two tracks really for me. They kind of just, again, it all sort of just kind of flows like into one, like this album. But yeah, you have got some interesting keyboard parts on this, but for me the reason why it is only a 6 out of 10 is because it is very repetitive musically. It kind of uses the same sequences as it goes on, the same kind of chord sequences, the same sort of guitar parts, just repeated basically. Like there's no sort of separation between the verse and chorus and that. So I guess it has this kind of hypnotic effect is what they were maybe going for, but for me just something doesn't quite work with it. It is a sparse song lyrically. There's very few lyrics in it. It is a song which just lets the music do the talking. But when there are lyrics, they are very sort of abstract lines like, I changed the time in your house, the hours I take go so slow. So not really sure what he's on about there, but yeah, In Your House, alright song there, and would get a 6 out of 10 from me. And then the first side closes with a song called 3, which is another sort of shorter kind of linking track. It reminds me quite a bit of the second side of Bowie's Low. Of course, like I said, that was one of the musical inspirations for the album, and you can definitely hear it in this song. Again, it's just quite an unsettling track. You have got some sort of muffled vocals coming in towards the end of it, but it is very much dominated by drums and also the new keyboardist Matthew Hartley's synths on it as well. So yeah, 3 for me. Although it's not a great song, it is a great kind of mood piece, so I would give it a 7 out of 10 for that one. And then the second side kicks off with another kind of instrumental. It's called The Final Sound, and this is, again, it's a very gothy song, this very mysterious track, although it has got some kind of oriental touches on it as well. Now, it is only 53 seconds, this, so it is quite a short song. Now, a little fact with this, it was actually supposed to be a lot longer, this. They recorded a full version, maybe about, 4 to 5 minutes of this. However, the tape cut out while they were recording it, and because of the financial constraints, they were making the album, it meant that they couldn't correct this, they didn't have time or money to do so. So they basically just left it as it was. You can actually hear the tape cut out at the end of this song. But I do rather like it. I think if it had been much longer and they hadn't really, and the song maybe just carried on as it is, I don't think it would have been maybe quite as effective. I think it's something what I might have grown a bit tired of. But as it is, I think it serves as a really good introduction to the next song. So yeah, The Final Sound for me would also get a 7 out of 10. And the next song is easily the most popular, the most iconic song on the album. It is A Forest, which was the band's first UK hit single. It reached number 31 on the charts here, which is rather remarkable. I mean, considering the song is not very commercial at all, it's sort of got this very sort of dark, mysterious kind of electric guitar riff, and then these lyrics of being lost in a forest all alone. Now, apparently their manager at the time, a guy called Chris Parry, wanted the single version of this to be remixed to make it more commercial. However, thankfully they didn't do that. The single version is basically it's a bit shorter than the album one, but it's essentially the same song, and I think it really helped sort of mainstream the whole sort of the gothic rock sort of sound what they had going. This sounds a few years later became very much in vogue. So yeah, A Forest, a great song. For me, would be a 10 out of 10. It is an absolute classic there. Next song up is called M. Very, very simple title there, but this is a like, even though like this album is considered quite a dark and quite a sort of gothic album, this track, musically at least, sounds quite bright. You've got this sort of breezy acoustic guitar in it, and these lyrics sort of about falling in love and that. I mean, it is a very pleasant song. Just for me, it isn't very memorable though, but like when it is on, like I do like very much like enjoy it. So yeah, M would get an 8 out of 10 from me. Next up is called At Night, which has a much more kind of fuzzier tone like on the bass of this one here, but it is a very hooky riff like Simon Gallup plays on it. Lyrically, it's quite, again, very typical of this album, quite dark, quite unsettling. He sings on it, "The hours go by, you sleep in a safe bed, curled and protected, protected from sight, under a safe room, deep in your house, unaware of the changes at night." So yeah, very much like typical Cure stuff there. But like, I mean, it is also the longest track on the album. And for me, the reason why it's maybe not a 9 out of 10 is because it does for me go on a little bit too long. And like, yeah, it's a good song, but yeah, maybe just a little bit overstretched. But certainly, this is a prime example like of the Cure sort of like spreading their wings and being very, very, very far removed from their debut album.
Time tips away.
Then we've already reached the album closer, the title track, 17 Seconds, which is again another dark, another murky kind of track. The lyrics do have a kind of vagueness to them, but they're also quite poetic as well. He sings in it, "The dream had to end, the wish never came true." So it's definitely not a sort of jolly upbeat end to the album, but I do think it is one of the better songs on the record. I think it is one of the more melodic songs. It's certainly like, it certainly sticks like in like your head, like this song, like especially like the chorus line, like when they sing 17 Seconds. And yeah, I just think it rounds off the album quite well. So that one for me would get a 9 out of 10. Okay, so overall, this album would score 79%. So I do think this is one of the more sort of interesting second albums like out there, because I think it is a complete change around like from their first. Like usually bands like sort of like with second albums, it's very much a case of trying to replicate the first, like trying to do sort of like a quick follow up. Like whereas The Cure went in a completely different direction and like sort of like that, yeah, like really sort of like created like what would become like their signature sound on here. And yes, while it does definitely show The Cure kind of moving forward, like with time, there are moments on the album where it's just a bit too bleak. There's maybe a few too many instrumental tracks on here, and in some songs, some of the musical elements do get a bit repetitive. But like at the same time, it does contain a couple of absolute classics, namely "Play for Today" and "A Forest." And like I said, it is a significant album for The Cure, because like after this, like they would make like 2 further albums, Faith and Pornography, which are now kind of considered like to be like a trilogy of these sort of very dark sort of Cure albums. Like I mean, like, but for me, like aside from like those those highlights like what I mentioned, and like maybe like a couple like of other 17 seconds and there isn't maybe too much to go back to like on this album, but it is an important record though for them, and yeah, certainly like I said, significant in their discography. So yeah, that's me come to the end of my review of The Cure's 17 Seconds. So yes, I hope you have enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time for the next one. Goodbye.